Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another edition of SM Advanced Forum. Tim's turning around in the background because I think we're on the wrong camera there, but hopefully I should pull through in a minute.
Excellent. Welcome to real quick, Dom, that as you asked me to do all this technology, since you're sitting in Stockholm and you have a busted arm, I decided to go with the Dan Rayburn background for...
Excellent. Well, industry to just have an informal gossip about latest hot trends and topics in and around the industry, gathering them from our Flipboard. So do check on SMAdvancedForum.com up in the top right-hand corner. So, as always, I'm joined by my normal hosts, although slightly awkwardly, I'm running on an iPad and Tim he's muted himself, so we can't hear him. There we go.
Wirecast setup that we have. Got a demo version. It didn't work, but really good product.
Great product.
And getting ready for Streaming Media West, of course, coming up in a week and a half. Now, are they going to let you travel abroad with that weapon on your arm?
Injury. Able to wire up the fracturing my wrist in two places.
I think I should just hang up with me.
Yeah, please.
Go for it.
Okay, Immersive Media and the stream. I'm happy to be invited to be on the show.
The hosts first.
Protocol, man. What the hell? It's Mark East here. Outstanding. This is Mark, and I'm in my new home here in lovely San Diego, California, for the first time on SMAF, and looking forward to a lively discussion. I want to hear more about Arianne's gig and what is considered immersive media these days. But are we supposed to talk about what we've done lately, Dom? Is that still
tell us what
protocol?
you've been up to for the last few weeks. Yeah.
So the usual. We've just done New York Comic-Con for Marvel. That was a fun time. It was interesting to be able to juxtapose that crowd to the larger San Diego Comic-Con. Once again, a sort of grueling 4-day, all-day show that we produced for them, but it was a lovely time. And then we just finished BlizzCon for Blizzard Entertainment, and we've been doing a ton of what we're calling remote event management. So we have a number of customers now that we produce live content for on a with multiple concurrent shows happening every day. A lot of sports, a lot of esports, things like that. So just ramping up a lot of those efforts. So yeah, things are good.
Cool. Excellent. And Tim, why don't you find out who our other guest is this month?
Sorry, Michelle was just texting me saying it actually looks good. She was watching the YouTube, so I'm happy to know that. All right, so let's see. Speaking of Disney and Marvel and all that stuff, we have somebody who's sitting on the West Coast who actually has a history in doing streaming for everything from entertainment to...
Me 25 years, enjoying the sunshine. So, as you said right now, so I'm going to apologize for some of the background noise. I am actually on the...
I realized you probably weren't supposed to say...
Yeah, despite it looking like I might be in a humidor, Dom, I am actually in a cafeteria right now.
Yeah. That's what you're
trying to...
Excellent. So, Daren, what's foremost in your mind at the moment in the sector? What's the big news in the streaming industry?
Totally got out of this industry and tried to retire and do something completely different, and got dragged back in. So this year's been one of the largest media acquisitions in history right now. So I won't go into too much of the detail, but what it does bring up is, the consolidation. So yeah, and all these streaming services, right? So I think you had a guest on here earlier, Matt Smith, a colleague of mine over at CTS, and they were talking about 270 paid for plus services out there in the market. So it's really, what does that look like? The whole cord cutting people talking about is getting more expensive, not cheaper, and that was what everybody wanted. People buying studios, content, current service providers. We heard about is how this is all going to consolidate and grow over the next 12 to 24 months.
Interesting. And what do you think? Do you think it's going to consolidate, or do you think it's going to? Yeah, I mean, we're going to see more service
coming out, right? It's interesting. Everyone's like, can Netflix and Disney? Sorry, everybody. I'm on that walkway where everybody goes past, so I'm trying to cut the background noise down.
If you see any
everyone
famous
will
people,
talk.
then get them to stop and say hello. Yeah.
One was like everyone talks about Netflix and Disney, exist in this space, and it's like, look, at the end of the day, is content's king. Certainly for me, I drop in and out of Netflix every now and then, but I will go sign up because it has a show that's exclusive, and that's the only place I can get it. Right? If content, but it's you can't help the fact that there are some big companies like the one I work for, certainly seeing an increase in content, the type of content and the quality of the content that's coming out. And I think a lot of it's just going to be the diversification of, if like me, I want to watch what I want to watch when I want to watch it.
Advocate for us. Oh, sorry, Tim, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dom, and then I want to interrogate him as well.
Got a question for you, and equally to anyone on in the group, do chime in. But one of the things that concerns me at the moment in the industry is with the consolidation at the top end, with the FANG and the Disney G vendors. Not excluding myself, for technology, 10 million a year price technology services. I'm not going to be specific, but that type of budget level. But technology vendors selling at the premium top end technology stack, and I have a feeling that the consolidation at the very top of the content industry is going to trickle down as a bit of a trouble spot for technology vendors selling into that service provider, because there aren't plays like in the UK, Channel 4, ITV's catch-up services. I think they're going to fade into existence because they're now competing with this brewing problem for people. I'm going to pick on someone. I'm going to say someone like Ericsson. These 5 million, 10 million packages work into one, and they build one workflow. That's 14 opportunities for the mid-tier technology vendors that have just wondered what you think.
Yeah. I really, there's a lot I'd love to say, and I consolidate into one. And we're one of the 11, by the way. And it's a question of whether we'll play as being one of those 11. Will we get down to being the final one? Do they want to bring it in-house? We're seeing certain people, got a significant amount of cash and want to build and own it directly themselves. And continue on the innovation. It's a challenge, right? I mean, my current employer is, which we white label and then sell, either in pieces or as an overall service that you can just literally put your brand on it and provide out. But I can't disclose the number of cars we have, but it's a number that some people think. Yeah, there is definitely some consolidation. There's definitely some aggregation out there. We're facing some of that. I think the trade-off is that the bigger services are growing and consumption goes up. So depending on the business model and technology and licensing, revenues are changing from some selling more and more technology over and over to actually just growing the current service. Does that make sense? So subscription numbers go up. I don't get to go long. Yeah, it's a challenging one. I mean, we are seeing, more services come in. There are different platforms, like we've just launched, Vert channels, actually doing linear broadcast, and the scale of channels that are available, that's increasing. So licensing is going up in one direction, and not necessarily was that whole licensing model of how you license servers and stream count and everything else. So yeah, it is a challenge.
I have a question.
Definitely going to be a challenge.
So with respects, make it even more complicated? Like, HEVC versus ABC, or am I going off?
Any comment to Arianne's question?
I don't want to answer that one either.
Okay.
Other than the whole. But from a bandwidth availability and scale, these are we're already seeing people push the limits in terms of what the network capacity is and evolve in terms of adoption. Right.
Agreed. And if I can just add a small point, I think it's less about HEVC versus AVC and more about Dash versus HLS or even CMAF.
Rule them all. Every time in the 25 odd years I've been in this sector, there's always this kind. But in effect, every time a new device turns up which has specific power, does anyone see that?
I mean, they would.
Well, I feel like we almost got there. I was going to say, I feel like we almost got there, at least on the codec side with 264. But that, if you look back at the history, Dom, and in fact, it's funny you talk about the one ring to rule them all. Gary Williams, years before it ever hit streaming, but he understood that there was a benefit to having a single while it was the right idea, and I think CMAF is sort of the right idea, and I've written about that, I think the fringe cases are not fringe cases. I think they're sort of niche cases that end up being used by 10 to 15% of the industry, and therefore you can't really cover the gamut with a single thing, whether it's a format, a package, etc.
I think it's the only place I can think it's possible in audio. But of course, MP3 is not popular. It's not perceived as being the highest quality. It's not
coming out of the voice over IP and video over IP. G.711 and the 7 series are everywhere, but it took them 20 years to get there.
Yeah. Mark, are you seeing it in the production end? Are you seeing any?
It depends on what you mean. There are backhaul codecs. There are end streaming codecs. In both cases, there's very little push to use anything but 264 currently. I think in terms of bonded LT exclusively use of that, they're deprecating all of the devices, the Geros and the Live Views and the TVU packs that use 264. Those are going to end users, and the adoption of those technologies and devices. Yeah, it's still all about 264 for us, whether it's HLS or Dash or what have you on the delivery side.
And it's interesting you say that about the deprecation, Mark, because even ISDN drivers are getting pulled out of the Linux kernel around being able to take a vanilla T1 or E1 and convert it into individual channels and do priority on that. Sometimes I almost wonder if we deprecate stuff because we think we don't need it, but in reality we haven't gotten to the replacement of what's coming next. It's like Apple when they get rid of connectors on the sides of their devices. When they went to USB-C, everybody was like, wait a second, we still have USB-A's. How are we going to do that? And Apple's response was, buy a bunch of dongles and then you'll be able to do what you did before for nothing.
I just built a system for BlizzCon that we used for real-time translation, and it was based on Mac Minis, and I ended up with 6 dongles hanging out the back of my 2 Mac Minis. It was, a little ridiculous.
Exactly what's going on behind my iPad right now.
The march of technology.
And what's going on up here as well. Yeah.
I would argue though that is there still a use case for ISDN? Like, is that not a technology that should be pulled out of a kernel?
It's being deprecated on the BT networks next year, I believe, but it is still, which is a major problem for traditional radio broadcast.
That's exactly
radio audio streaming is the great thing about an ISDN line is it's a private circuit between you and the ISP, so there's no contention. So it's like a temporary leased line, and for audio content contribution, that's been a lifeline, and there is no alternative.
And here's what's fascinating about that, Dom. As you mentioned that, it's not only essentially a lease line, it is a guaranteed bidirectional 56K or 64K, depending on whether you do raw bit, all the way up to whatever you want it to be as an E1. And ultimately, while I get that we're getting better at compression and bringing things down to where there's a sweet spot that you can do stuff across the public network, as you say, places like radio, there are a number of other instances. Those are the tried and true technologies that are guaranteed to work, as opposed to the sort of best effort public network.
So I'm going to make one comment on compression technologies and to an extent on this standards diversification thing, which has come out of I'm currently at Streaming Tech Sweden at the moment, and I'm not going to say who because I'm not sure it's appropriate on SMAF to quote people, but one of the speakers is from from the biggest CDN, let's put it like that, and he and I were talking, and it's a very interesting point. CDNs have expanded so much. Akamai's just hit 100 terabit. Limelight's hitting 60 or 80 terabit. What that's done is it's more than decimated pricing. Pricing is sub 1 cent a gig now. Cent saving by switching from HEVC to AV1 or to VVT or whatever the next hot compression trend is. They might be saving £1,000 saving that the bandwidth introduces. For example, my big passion, IP multicast, that skill set is infinitesimally small, and so it's extremely expensive to hire in, and probably makes very little relative difference to the bottom line cost of your content, especially when the top line cost of your production and your rights acquisition just is many, many, many times bigger. So I think we might be reaching a zenith with that, but it actually is quite a nice segue, because I think there are new technologies on the horizon, and there are new features that are about holographics and streaming. That's just caught my ear completely.
Well, okay, so it's really that are not necessarily well designed to deliver 2D video. I mean, if you think about even the VR headset, even though you put the headset of what the user can look at is available, what what we're observing is that the display technology is changing quite a bit, and their motivation was to provide the same type of experience that one would get with the headset, but without having to wear the headset. So if you think about how we see things in the real world, obviously we're not wearing a headset, but we're also able to experience natural visual cues like depth and specularity. What we're trying to do is with these displays is recreate that experience, and ultimately you end up getting to something like a hologram. So this brings us to thinking about scientific topics like the Star Trek holodeck, or even like what we saw with Princess Leia in the original Star Wars. This display company I've been talking about is able to has created a display that will create a hologram in front of the display. It's 2D video. So maybe that wasn't as clear of an explanation, but ultimately the displays are emerging. Even with Magic Leap and HoloLens, those are not necessarily displays that would naturally you'd want to send 2D video to. You need a new type. I think if we want to encourage the creation of new display technology, get away from the 2D screen, then we need to be thinking about streaming media that's beyond 2D video. And that's where a lot of my work has been
Interesting.
spent these last few years.
Do you remember, Tim, must have been 2010. I remember you came over to the UK and we sat in we sat in a sports game going on a tabletop. And it was just it's a really interesting problem, not just filming it, but how you render it, what material you might represent it in. Like, you see the augmented reality demos these days, but it feels like we're close, but I'm not sure. I haven't seen any.
We are close.
Yeah.
If you remember, Microsoft Surface table years ago, but that was still a 2D flat plane. So what Arianne's saying is really quite interesting.
Oh yeah, this is they call it a light field display. Maybe you've heard of that.
No. How does it work?
Light field. It works by pixels, and with a light field display, each pixel itself is ultimately will create the hologram. So each little pixel is itself has subpixels that each project a ray of light. So you might call each pixel a holographic pixel, as opposed to just a single pixel, which would produce one ray of light.
And if you think about it, the Lytro camera, which came out a couple years ago, was a light field camera. Essentially, it used a series of planes of light, almost like ray tracing, to capture the image. And then what you could do in software is actually choose where your focal point was. And your focal point didn't have to be deep. It didn't have to be the Z-axis. It could actually be flipped over like a 4x5 camera, like what I used in college, where you could actually have your focal plane being parallel to you or perpendicular. So yeah, it's interesting that they're working on displays from that standpoint.
Oh yeah, it's the same people from Lytro that are working on the light field display.
Wow. Oh, that sounds
Okay, so
fascinating.
that's my topic for 10 years out.
That's amazing. Do you
So-
think it's 10 years out? Do you think, Arianne, do you think it's 10 years out before we have tabletop holographic displays?
I would say 10 or maybe 8 years. I would say 10 years would be the most.
Oh, it's a reason to give up smoking. I want to see that.
Well, it's it's interesting because already the content producers Hollywood has amazing tools to create really great 3D assets. But once that's created, and as we get to the distribution of that content over commercial networks, it all gets flattened and becomes a 2D version. So I think the point is that a lot of content exists, and we want to find a way to preserve the richness of that content, including its natural 3D perspective, and deliver that over commercial networks to these types of displays that are just starting to emerge.
It's
So,
interesting.
Dom,
Sorry, Tim.
I was going to say, you talk about, the 8 to 10 years living to see that. When I first started my very first job working for the Department of Defense in crisis management, public relations, I pulled a quote and I pasted it on the front of my Xerox Star, which was the precursor to the Apple machines. And I think Harvard Business Review is the one who'd had this. It was it talked about what it would take to do a 180-degree movie where you could walk around the screen hemispherically that would have 120 slices of different videos, so that as you walked, you saw the perspective change. It turned out at that point it was 1.5 petabytes worth of information. I kept that because that was like a major goal for me to figure out whether we actually would get to that in our lifetime. And so with this description here, it's like, yeah, okay, we're really actually not that far off from it. I'm not saying I want to die as soon as that happens, because I'd like to be around to enjoy it. But that was 1992 when I pulled that quote. And I've sort of...
What the bit rates and the transmission, are they at that stage yet? Have they actually got some sort of compression and transport system developed for this?
Fortunately, it's already being compressed and represented in very efficient formats by the digital content creation. We don't necessarily have to transmit the petabytes per second. I would say that the first consumer-facing holographic display would require about maybe 1.5 gigabits per second, which is doable in the next 10 years with commercial networks. I mean, so a lot of Comcast, for example, offers gigabit per second speeds already, services.
I can see
earlier comment. So I just got like 6 emails from my clients going, "Hey, I don't get some penny for my CDN delivery. Can we come back and have a conversation again?" Man, thanks, Tom.
Sorry.
It's interesting.
You need to concentrate on the value added.
And then we can. I just want to pick up on it on the comments from Arianne. So as I said, I was out for 4 years. And when I came back in, it was the first deal I did was a Netflix CDN deal in about 4 or 5 weeks of being on US soil. And I remember being in the room, right, and our CEO was booming over the conference call about it's never going to get to a penny, right? And I'm like, just listen to what the guy's asking you. He just wants a price point. And at the time, we were like, yeah, you spend 100 million, you'll get to sub a penny. Now I came back in, right, this year. And I saw the CDM prices. I'm like, wow, we got there very quickly. Yeah. So yeah, there are some. It's what the decreasing in costs has obviously been made up in sheer volumes, right? I mean, for a guy who walked out at 16 with no education, decimal point is fractions of a penny, and 0.003 and 0.00125. but you're for next year, right? And some of the numbers that these guys are predicting for 4K stream of capacity, and there's probably not even 4 that can do that in the US right now. So all these local access speeds of like gigabit internet and everything else, delivery, right? So we don't do it. We don't have any of the other issues that other CDNs do. A small object delivery, edge. So the traffic and volume of what we're seeing from our broadband users is incredible, and it's China. You just can't build it. We're doing funny because I'm working on one of the recent deals that I did. We work on a global basis, and I'm doing a European Premier League in Indonesia right now. So we're like, you do that, you know that European Premier League is playing everything for a global launch. So other people are like, I want sub a penny, and it's like, well, yeah, and normal times, off-peak network time, certain applications you'll get it, but you want to be prime time TV time, and you want to compete against other major. Yeah. I was going to buy some capacity, but yeah, it's not going to be at the rate.
Well, it sounds like you need to get onto the content producer and do.
Yeah.
So interesting. We talked about tying up the capacity, Daren, because if you remember, I guess it was 96, 97, there was this big concern about not having enough capacity for the backhauls, the OC12s, 96s, etc. And then dense wave division multiplexing came along, and magically you had 12 times the amount of bandwidth that you had before. Do you see that we've got technology sort of coming down the pipe that will increase capacity like that? For instance, Limelight has talked about how they've increased their capacity both through physical connection, but also through some software optimization in terms of the overall throughput. Are there technologies out there like DWDM that will suddenly take us back to the glut problem as opposed to the dearth problem?
Right. So there's that, long haul, back haul. One of the biggest challenges is actually the local caching and storage, and that seems to be the one of trying to make it work. Is what people are asking you to host where. I have a particular company that has, petabytes of storage that they want cached with a 99% cache hit rate, right? And it's long tail catalog. And some of those assets date back, like they sold them in content. Sucks, right? And so you're saving on the backhaul, long haul, but you're increasing local costs around, trying to cache this stuff and host large catalogs to clients that have an obligation where
keeping it on SSDs instead of hard drives because it's got to be instantly available, that kind of thing.
Yeah, think about having to replicate, I don't know, Disney's catalog or the Fox catalog, whatever it is, right? Amazon's catalog. Like everyone has to hold that on a network somewhere, right? And it's not just one CDN, 156 POPs in the US. Every broadband head end that we have in the metropolitan area is our distributed CDN. And then to go and hold that everywhere, that last mile broadband, true last mile for us, the sheer cost of having all those servers and availability completely puts the business model off. Can we get it between the two really quick? Oh yeah, that fiber connection is, it's gig. Sorry, it's getting loud in here now. But yeah, it's the cable cost is not high; it's the machine cost.
Very interesting. Well, so I'm just having a little. Go on, sorry, Tim.
I just wanted to ask one other quick question. So, in the old days, Daren, and I'm dating myself, we would do LTO tapes so you'd have near field storage and online storage. Hard drives would be online, near field would be LTO. In the progressive download days, what you do is you load up in the hard drive the first 35 to 40 seconds of any video, so that when somebody came to do it, essentially it hit the cache, quote unquote. But in reality, if they watched longer, you had to make sure the LTO machine could keep up with the speed of actually getting the content to the drive before it needed to be downloaded to the person on the other end. Do we have equivalent problems these days with SSDs versus hard drives in terms of just the cost and capacity?
I only caught half of that because you broke up a little bit, but I'm also dating my age because I remember all those times as well, right? back in those real network days of like, you know, basically all the downloads and distribution and trying to do that thing over dial-up. Yeah, there's still challenges, right? I mean, you know, technology is getting cheaper, but it's just the sheer scale of it, and it's the instant gratification and the way people are delivering services right now. That's still hitting the models. So, from a technology standpoint, mine's less about the tech, and it's more about trying to help that business model work. That's the whole pricing model I'm going through right now, which is taking everything we did a couple of years ago. So a lot of these contracts are long term, and the market has moved on, and the business model and pricing doesn't fit the need for holding all these catalogs, and that's my challenge. I got plenty of other technical people to figure out how we get that to run.
Got it. Thanks.
That's me tap dancing. That's me tap dancing around not being able to answer your question.
That's fine.
Gotta do, Dom.
Yeah, not bad. I thought for you, Daren. So I'm going to jump subject a little bit here. One of the ones that's just come up from the SMAF dialogues and so on. I can't remember the name of the service, but one of the big names from about 5-6 years ago has shut down today. Announced that it couldn't compete with piracy of its own content. And I just wanted to sort of bring up piracy as a general topic, and to an extent segue into taken for piracy when people are starting up content plays at the moment. And I do think that it's if not significant double digits, really. First of all, is there anything we can technically do about it? And second about that, and if your thoughts have maybe changed over the last 5 or 10 years.
And I think that's really important.
Jump in.
Arianne is talking about, with the fact that you have these new immersive technologies, which will be very prone to piracy. So I'd be interested to hear her perspective.
Mm.
Oh, well, you know, I have to say that, you know, the piracy issue is certainly getting a lot more attention amongst the service providers. And right now, what I'm most aware of is that it's the NCTA, which is a consortium of cable service providers and studios are working very closely on that issue. And to be honest with you, I don't know. I agree that it's going to be a problem certainly for immersive content, and it's certainly a growing problem today. But unfortunately, I don't know how to fix it.
I guess, Arianne, one question I've got there is, you've got these companies that are making huge investments in technologies and in content. Does it scare any of them away? Maybe is the major question I'm trying to ask, because of the fact that piracy is rampant, or will they continue to progress, assuming that piracy can get addressed, you know, as these technologies emerge?
So I think my perspective is, my observation is that this problem with piracy is a big problem, regardless of whether the media is immersive or not. And what we do for immersive media will certainly have to take into account everything that's done for traditional, more legacy type media. And so I don't necessarily see that being a focus issue right now. It's more about, as you know, to some of Daren's points, is just getting it to be small enough to make it commercially viable and fit on the networks. That's the big.
Gigabit a second is an expensive piracy hobby.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, interesting. Daren, what you got any thoughts about on piracy space, or does it simply never happen in your world?
Oh no, it happens, right? I mean, again, think of where I'm sitting. These guys don't take very lightly to it, right? So you know, we were under some very strict rules and contingencies, right? And you know, they're able to invest in the technology to stop people from doing it. It's less progressive here. I mean, you're always going to get people that are going to try and steal stuff, right? It's just how motivated they are to do it. unfortunately, we just grew up in a world where the internet was free, and people are always going to try and fight and resist. I think actually a lot of the larger content people here are having more issues around password sharing and stuff like that, right? Rather than people actually ripping it off. But in other parts of the world, you are seeing that piracy. I think you're seeing a lot of services that are, they're capturing sort of the linear rights and distribution and putting them on boxes that people give people free access to, right? Bypassing the paid wall or subscription based services, and they come and go. I think it's a case of running the gambit of whether they can build traction and volume and subscriber base and make a business model work before they get caught. But there are technologies. It was funny looking at the transition between two of the media companies I'm working with right now, which is, one takes a reactive as opposed to the other that's very proactive, and there was just a lot of stuff that we had to do, big table stakes, right? We'd spend billions. I mean, it was funny because I was having to explain to somebody on why their pricing model was so low, and buying into the dream and buying into the vision, and actually making $6 a month is nothing compared to the the 10.8 billion dollars they made in merchandising from that one particular film, right? So you got to really choose my words carefully.
I'm going to suddenly see the shepherd's crook pull you off.
All the long knives coming out and everything. Yeah, done. It's just when the screen goes black and I'm off there.
What's that red dot on your forehead?
Exactly. Mickey trying to figure out where he.
But it was interesting. So I was doing. There's a napkin that Walt Disney did in 1953 of his vision about all of the content films. This is widely on the internet. And this sort of came back around again, and it's all about fielding people into the park, and then once they're in the park, it's buying all of this merchandising and everything else. Do you know that they just repurposed that, and it's still true today in terms of what this business model is? And yeah, those companies take it very seriously. It's the unique niche content providers that are coming out that I worry about is like the effects of piracy. And then there's just other content. Like if you look at the esports stuff right now, is the business model for that directly, but also what it's driving in terms of franchising and models to again the other commerce stuff that's driven off the back. So piracy comes from so many different angles for these guys, but I think here it's no longer the Wild West, and they just have a team of lawyers. They will find you.
Right, we've got 3 minutes left, and it's usually our tradition in the last few minutes of the show just to go around and find out what two things. One, are you up to any interesting events over the next month? And the second thing to find out from you is what do you think is going to happen over the next month in the streaming industry? So I'm going to work clockwise around my board here and start with Arianne. What are you going to any interesting events over the next month? And what do you think are going to be the major events in the streaming space over the next month?
So for me, I am going to be at a seminar in December. It's going to be hosted by the Advanced Imaging Society, and we're going to do an educational seminar on this immersive media topic that I've been sharing with you. And I want to give a shameless plug to this nonprofit alliance that is focused on developing standards for immersive media. It's called the Immersive Digital Experiences Alliance, so IDEA, or immersivealliance.org. So I'm part of that group, and we're going to be sharing our vision for how immersive media will play out in the next 10 years on December 14th at the AIS event.
That sounds like a topic we should get Eric to come, get you to come and speak about at Streaming Media, one of the future events. I think sounds like a hot one. Very cool. And any prediction for any particular big things coming up in the industry outside of your own sphere? Arianne?
I'm actively involved in MPEG, and I was just going to say I'm going to sit back and grab my popcorn and watch the video codec wars play out.
Yeah, that sounds like a good one. Cool. Daren, how about you? Got any interesting events coming up? And what do you think are going to be the big events over the next month?
Us, love them or hate them, right? Whatever, whether you buy into the dream and everything else, this is going to be huge. And regardless of the outcome, everyone just wants to know if doing a single global launch on one day, the Media West hits and the Disney Plus launch right on the 12th, as opposed to shows. Yeah, we're doing 3 in the same week, in the literally over the same days. So I'm going to be at Extreme Media West at the numbers, and I know the investment that Comcast has put in directly with our own Fusion team. We're one of the Blizzard leagues, right, for Overwatch. We've made a huge investment. I'm interested to see the monetization, if anyone's making. There's a lot of people spending money. I'm just wondering if they're making any money yet, right? So all the people that are out there mining it, as I said, the only people out of the gold rush were the arenas, etc. I just want to see whether the commercial models are in there. So I'm interested to see that one, the updates on Streaming Media West. Very much
Excellent.
So I look forward to seeing you guys there.
Absolutely. Looking forward to catching up with you as well, then. Mark, what's going on in your calendar over the next month? Any big events? And
us too. I think it's virtually the same thing. I'm looking forward to attending the entire Streaming Media West for the first time in years, because it's not concurrent with BlizzCon for once. So that's lovely. And the SVG Esports Production Summit will be a new one for us. And we're in the process of trying to build out our esports business. So that'll be an interesting one for sure. I think the big question on everyone's mind, I would say the end of the first quarter.
I think we might have lost Mark there. Are you there, Mark?
Perfect.
No, he's back. There we go. Go on.
Hello.
What was your last? No, we just lost your last
It's
sentence.
a lag.
Your last sentence.
Where'd you lose me?
You said Riot actually announced something that should be an esport by
new game. New
right.
esport.
So I think the question, to Darren's point, on everyone's mind is anyone making any money yet, or are we still purely in the speculative phase and it's only the production folks that are making any cash? It'll be interesting to see what the general consensus is at the SVG thing.
Perfect. Tim, how about your next month?
So Stream Media West doing interviews like I always do. Steve Nathans has me booked up pretty much nonstop for the 2 days. And I really like those, because some of those are people that I've known for years, and it's sort of an on the air, hey, how you doing? Let's catch up. Others, like we've had with some of the women in streaming media, people who've been at the show, who've come and talked to me. It's been really quite fascinating just to learn some of the hardcore engineering. Eric asked me to put a plug in, by the way, since he wasn't able to make it. He said they just confirmed for a fireside chat, Jason Prest, who's the Executive Vice President, Direct-to-Consumer Technology and Program Management at Warner Media. More importantly, he's the person responsible for the team that's going to be building out HBO Max. So talking about, large content providers creating solutions. That's actually going to be an event that's just added into Stream Media West. Of course, Roger Pantos is going to be there and a few others. So that show, I think, will keep me busy. And then predictions, I don't know. I think we're going to all rethink HEVC in the next couple months and say H.264 is going to be around for quite a bit longer than we expected.
Interesting.
I agree.
So, yeah, that is an interesting one. We're certainly not seeing any dwindling of the H.264. That was interesting. Good presentation on VVT today, and there are some interesting elements to VVT, but I think a lot of us from SMAF going to be at Streaming Media West, which is good. I haven't yet twisted Eric's arm because we managed to pull that off at Streaming Media East, and given Mark's there, we'd actually be corporate. So it would be really good to have all the hosts on air at one of the Streaming Media events.
The security guards again, Dom, like you did at Stream Media East, or will this be?
I am going to bring my own security guards with me as I now travel with like henchmen. So that's all good. And I think my prediction over the next 4 to 6 weeks is the one actor we haven't really seen a lot from in the space for about I just anticipate Google will do something, and that's just a gut feeling. There's no rumor or any particular gossip I'm going on there, but it's unlike it would be.
I think it's a good bet.
Yeah, it would be unlike them to stay quiet in such a good melee.
Agreed.
So we're back with SMAF on December the 5th, and me getting taken to pieces by somebody who knows a lot more about 8K than I do. Then do tune in next month with International Women's Day, and we think it would be cool to let the ladies have all the controls, or maybe Tim will quietly run Wirecast in the background, but we won't be on February. The normal boys won't be on February. So
you may never get it back after like what we went through setting this up this morning, right? The ladies just may be taking over. The
saddest. Well, fortunately, we're not revenue driven at all. Otherwise, I'm sure we'd see a spike which our sponsors would cling on to and kick us all off.
I was going to say, Daren, by the way, you were talking about how you used to like it when everything was round numbers. I have a fiance who was at the Women Streaming Media event at IBC with me, who happens to be a mathematician. So if you need some tutoring, just like I'm happy to let you know.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, please.
Cool. Well, we
Sure,
overran a couple.
Go
on. We overran a couple of minutes on the start, and go on, Daren, say it.
There's a lag. I was going to say my customers like my business models because I'm sure they don't tell me when I get the decimal point wrong, right? Yeah, that sounds great.
Cool, excellent. Right, well, we now know to do all our maths in integers for Daren's sake in future. And with that, I'd like to say a huge thanks to Daren. You have to say thank you back so the camera cuts to you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Huge thanks to Arianne. Thank you very much for joining us. And to Mark. I look forward to seeing you next week. Yay. And to Tim, who's got to rush away from the screen to go and put us off air. So thanks very much, everyone. We'll see you next week.
I had my finger on the button. All right. I'm out now.
See you.